Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us for a check-in on our comprehensive plan. And I hear myself in an echo. That's a good reminder that we have lots of people watching us, hopefully on our Facebook page as well. So tonight we're here to talk about our comprehensive plan, which is a plan for the next 10 to 20 years in the city of York. I'm joined by the mayor, Michael Helfrich, and Melanie Baldwin to my right, your left, who will be manning the Facebook page for us, and any questions or comments that you might have throughout, Melanie will be helping us out.
Is she manning or womaning?
She might be womaning, I think.
She's womaning.
Womaning.
Okay.
Yeah. So as an introduction, I'm going to turn things over to Mayor Helfrich.
Thank you, Mike. I just want to express my gratitude, particularly to the team and all of the volunteers that participated or that are participating in this comprehensive plan. I own copies of comprehensive plans the whole way back to 1945. It's one of my things as a history buff. I like to review, what were people thinking at different times and what did they see the cities would be looking like in the future. And what we frequently see, and sometimes even see written into the documents, is that the movers and shakers of York got together for the comprehensive plan. Well, that's kind of a code speak for the, particularly in the past, the white male leaders of the city determining the future of this city. And hold on, we're getting echoes again. Are we good, Melanie? Okay. So I had directed Mike and the team to make sure that this comprehensive plan was about the people of the city of York and where the people felt we needed to go. Not just buildings and streets and businesses, but what do we really need to do to address the issues that we have in this city? Because you can have as many new sidewalks and new buildings and even new businesses, but if the folks in the city are struggling, if they're in poverty, if with the violence, having the violence in the city, that's not going to progress. It's only going to continue to work against the advancements of traditional comprehensive planning. So I'm very, very proud of what our team has done. First, let me thank the team. Mike Pritchard, thank you. Our Economic and Community Development Director, Nona Watson, thank you. Melanie Baldwin, our Grants Coordinator, Blandon Ace, James Crosby, Nancy Griffin, Diaz Woodard, and Steve Buffington were all members of the Department of Economic and Community Development that went out and spoke with people directly, took notes, compiled these notes into what will become the city's comprehensive plan, the plan for the next 20 years. They then brought together a group of volunteer residents, 18 residents from our community, and for the first time, I believe, in the history of York, half of the volunteer team were African Americans. We had Latino representation, three Latino out of 18, three folks represented themselves as Latinos, and 7 individuals were white individuals. So we had a diverse team. And by the way, I always feel a little bit disappointed when our Latino representation doesn't reach the population demographics that we have. So that is something I'm requesting, and I always request. We need more folks from the Latino community to step forward and represent themselves. We are currently, the Latino population is by census numbers the second highest, but by entrances into the York City School District and by knowing that the Latino population is always underrepresented in the census, I can say that if not now, within a couple of years, we will be a majority Latino community. Reading is, Lancaster is, or is very, very close. And that being the case, we need Latino representation within the government, within these committees, all across the board. We need Latino representation to make York a success. And if we, as the non-Latinos, are not engaging the Latinos, we lose, and we all lose. So I would ask for any opportunity that anybody from of Latino ethnicity wants to engage in the city business, in city committees, anything like that, please contact our office. We have positions open on commissions and boards and authorities and temporary committees, such as the Comprehensive Planning Committee. Also, what I'm very excited about, and I'm not excited that we have low income, that people are living in low income conditions, but I am excited that we have representation on this committee from individuals that meet the low income criteria. We are not just listening to the wealthy or even the middle class, but nearly 25% of this committee were from households below the city median income, which, if you don't know, is very low. So I'm just very pleased, Mike, and your team, for how well you have put together your resources and how much they represent the community of the city of York. And again, for the first time, I believe that we will have a plan that really represents everybody. So just thank you very much. Thank you for going out. This one more thing. These folks were not settled with just having public meetings or getting survey inputs. They were out knocking on doors. They were out talking to people individually. And this is something that always comes up. Well, you did a survey. Well, it takes a certain kind of person to fill out a survey. Somebody that has enough time, somebody that has enough interest. Surveys don't always get to what the folks are really thinking that need us the most. And so the fact that they went out door to door, that they had meetings in the neighborhoods, in the parks, I think you just did a great job of trying to overcome the barriers that we sometimes have of getting the input from the people that we represent. So thank you to the entire team. Thank you particularly to those volunteers on the committee, and thank you for showing up tonight, some of those volunteers. And I look forward to seeing your update on the plan as we continue what has been, because of COVID, a rather lengthy process. We kind of got stalled for about a year and a half with it being hard to engage people directly. But it's better to have a good product and take your time when you have to. And under these conditions, you've just done an amazing job. So thank you again.
Thank you, Mayor. So we'll move in then to a bit of a presentation here. The agenda tonight is really to go over what the comprehensive planning process is, as a quick reminder for those of you who have watched one of these before or been involved in the process, and then to talk about really the details of the work that's occurred over the last 6 to 8 weeks in our workshops centered around the different goals and objectives for the comprehensive plan. And to announce that we have a real draft document of some of those actions that we want to prioritize that is now available on the website. And we'll get to that in just a minute. So planning overall is a organized process of dealing with change. So we know that change is going to happen, right? That our community will be changing in some way or another, and we can do our best to try to predict that, but the important thing is really that we create a process of planning so that when our community does change, we can react to it, and we can, to some degree, be proactive about predicting some of those changes as well. So a comprehensive plan is just one tool in the planning toolbox. A comprehensive plan creates a blueprint for our land use patterns of tomorrow. So again, it's a blueprint, it's a compass, I've said a few times, it's a roadmap, lots of metaphors you can use, but the important thing is that it's a plan for land use plans and land use patterns, so how we use the land in the city of York. And tomorrow, obviously, it's focused on the next 10 to 20 years. So I wanted to touch base, and if you watch the last check-in in October, this graphic should look familiar to you, but this is really the planning process of updating our comprehensive plan. We started with a listening tour, which the mayor touched on. We developed the values, goals, and objectives of the plan, which I'll go through in just a minute. Then we kind of split into two separate paths. One to do a survey and other data collection to get a good understanding of the community as it stands right now, and to put together those working group sessions, which we're going to go into tonight, the workshops. At the same time, we were having neighborhood conversations. As the mayor said, we went out and spoke to residents. We just knocked on people's doors. We didn't know who we were going to be speaking to. And we had conversations about what they liked about their neighborhood, why they live where they live, and what they want to see in their community. Following that, we will be creating vision statements for each neighborhood. For the areas that have neighborhood associations, we'll be working closely with the neighborhood associations. But as you may know, not every part of the city is covered by a neighborhood association. So we'll be working with other partners in the community to try to gather that feedback and that input on crafting those vision statements for each neighborhood in the city. So you can see with this arrow here, we're almost at the end here. We're putting together the plan, which is really the capital projects, the investments, and the policy changes that we want to see and that we think we need to accomplish to achieve our goals and our objectives of the plan. There's an important loop here that I think is really important to point out as well, that through the life of the plan, over the next 10 years, until we update this comprehensive plan again, we need to make sure that there's regular feedback and there's accountability. So we're saying right now, we've come together as a community to say, these are the things that we want to accomplish, and we want to make sure that this plan doesn't just sit on my desk or anybody's desk, and we're not revisiting it and making sure that we're still on the right track next year, in 5 years, in 7 or 8 years, before we update it in full in another 10 years. So again, I just want to say that we're almost at the end here. We're coming up on having a full draft comprehensive plan. So again, let's talk about the values and the policy lenses quickly. The values are sort of the underlying themes and the shared understanding of what is important to us as a community. Safety and welfare for our residents and our visitors, first and foremost. The city exists in some part for safety and welfare of our residents and visitors. That's really why government exists. Safety and welfare also for the workers that come into the community and for tourists that might only be visiting for a short period of time. Equity, demographic equity, but also geographic equity. So we want to make sure that if we're talking about improving the city, we're talking about improving the entire city, that we're not focusing on one neighborhood over another. Stewardship, that's being good stewards of our resources in the city, natural resources, architectural resources, and financial resources, obviously. Sustainability, anything that we're proposing and that we're prioritizing through this plan, we want to make sure that we have the fiscal and administrative sustainability to make sure that it'll last over the time that it needs to last to make real change in the community. And finally, predictability. So predictability in our policies, in our processes, and in our plans. As much as possible when you are interacting with the City of York, with the planning department, with anyone in the City of York, there shouldn't really be surprises, right? We want to be as predictable as possible. You should be able to look at this plan, other policies that we enact, and understand the path forward and how things should be working. So let's talk a little bit about the important terms and concepts that are used throughout the plan here. We have goals and objectives. Goals are very broad aspirations. There's 10 of them for the comprehensive plan. There's also objectives, which are just putting a finer point on each goal. Then a problem definition, and this is where we start to talk about the work that happened during these 9 workshops. The problem definition is made up of 4 parts. First, the current condition, talking about what the situation is like in the community right now. But the criteria is perhaps the most important thing. So if we're talking about any given objective of the comprehensive plan, what does success look like? In 10 years, or in 5 years, or in 20 years, as we talk about any problem in the city, how will we know that we're achieving success, and what does that success really look like? Then the cause is, why does the current condition, not match our vision of success? So talking about the reasons for the community being held back, or perhaps holding ourselves back from achieving the success that we want to see. And finally, the effect, which is if the current condition continues, what will happen? Basically, who cares about this, right? Why is this an important thing for us to work on? And that is important for two audiences. One, sometimes it's really important for us to remind ourselves why these things are important, but it's also to make sure that we have community buy-in, to make sure that people are really understanding why this is a priority for the city and for our partners. So I'm going to pause there because this is really the framework of some of the work that, all of the work that we did during these workshops. And I'm going to ask Melanie if there are any questions on Facebook. And thank you. And we have a good group of people here. If there are any questions about what I went over so far, I'm happy to answer those. This doesn't need to be a super formal conversation, but if not, that's okay too, and I'll continue. Sure. And can I ask that you just go up just for our friends on Facebook so that they can be able to hear you?
Yeah, Jules Tolbert, I have a question, Mike, about two things. One, just a clarification on the planning process slide. There's a element called vision statements for each neighborhood.
Right.
And the arrow points that were beyond that.
Yeah.
So can you describe the level of accomplishment?
There should really be two arrows, I suppose.
Okay.
So there's one arrow pointing to in terms of the working group sessions, that top row, we're there. We're also working on these vision statements right there, and those are not part of this update right now. So we had those conversations with neighborhoods about what's important to the neighborhood when we were walking around and talking to residents. What are the assets? What do you like about the neighborhood? And those need to be synthesized into vision statements, and again, working with neighborhood associations and other groups to make sure that everybody's on the same page about that.
Great, thank you. And then one other question on the values and policy lenses, and perhaps you're going to get to this, but where does the aspect of increasing prosperity or increasing well-being for all residents, where does that fit into the array of values and policies that are described on that slide?
Yeah, I think that on one hand, equity obviously speaks to that that topic, that we're looking for things that are improving the city for all of our residents and all of our neighborhoods. But as we get into the goals and the objectives as well, you'll see how those goals really speak to improving wealth and well-being for residents in a couple of different ways.
Great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sure. Looks like there might be a question. Yeah. Hi, Ryan. No, you can go.
Okay. Ryan Supler. One of my questions is there a good mix of renters and homeowners who've been, I guess, engaged in part of the process?
Yeah.
And then also who have provided a lot of the input?
Yeah. That's a good question. So we did have a survey over the summer with over 200 people that responded to it, and we got, I believe it was about a third tenants and 2/3 homeowners, which is probably the inverse
like the opposite, yeah.
of how the community is made up. But that said, at the workshops and throughout the different conversations that we've been having as part of this process, it's been important to make sure that tenants, that we're collecting input from tenants as well, because, excuse me.
Or certainly long-term tenants, at least.
Sure, and both really,
Yeah.
short-term and long-term tenants, but homeowners obviously have been involved as well. Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
And Melanie?
This question comes from Eric Kirkland. Will the comprehensive plan include a land use plan and a housing plan per Article 3 of the municipality's planning code? That was one question.
Okay, so the short answer is yes. As part of the municipality's planning code, that's the state legislation that mandates comprehensive plans for each municipality. So there will be an update to our current and future land use maps and plans. And housing will also be part of that. So the comprehensive plan, as it stands right now, touches on all of the sections that Mr. Kirkland referenced, and we'll be working with our partners at the county to ensure that we're going into the detail that we need to from a state standpoint as well.
which leads into his next question. How is the city's comprehensive plan being integrated into the county growth management plan, GMP?
Sure. Yeah. So the county's growth management plan, and Mr. Kirkland's putting me a little bit on the spot here, which I really like, going back when I worked for the County Planning Commission. But as far as I know, the city of York is entirely in a primary growth area. So the county, thanks. The county growth management plan really tries to work to manage growth throughout the county so that what's called urban sprawl doesn't extend out throughout the entire county. As a municipality where we are fully a primary growth area, we are one of those places where we're not looking to, for instance, preserve agricultural soils in the city of York. So as we talk about, density and different types of uses, mixed use, higher densities, as we move from the comprehensive plan to the zoning ordinance, that higher level policy and guidance from the county guides the decisions that we make here in the city as well. Was there any follow-up to that? I'll give it just a second. I know there's a little bit of a delay, but. Nope. Okay. If there is, we can revisit. So I want to turn now, and this touches on Jules' question just a moment ago. And just to give everyone a frame of reference here, before we move into the goals and the objectives of the comprehensive plan as we've created it, if you're not familiar with this concept from psychology, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's a pyramid that says essentially at the bottom of the pyramid is your physiological needs, things like needing air, water, food, shelter, sleep, and clothing, moving all the way up through self-esteem and your self-actualization, right? And the point of this research and this concept is that without achieving your needs at the bottom of the pyramid, you're never going to get to the top of the pyramid. And very loosely, as we move then to the goals of the plan, they interact then in a similar way. So the first portion of our plan is about safe and healthy residents. It's the foundation of what needs to happen for us to achieve the two other sections that are above it. So the goals for self and healthy residents, improving property conditions, ending homelessness, challenging York's reputation as an unsafe place, increasing access to health service, and eliminating food insecurity. So you can see, again, those are very basic physiological needs of our residents. Moving up then, the second kind of section of the plan is prosperous and welcoming neighborhoods. So again, to Jules's question, they're talking about building wealth within our neighborhoods, building cohesive neighborhoods, and ensuring that all of our neighborhoods have complete streets, because that's an important piece of the built environment as well for the comprehensive plan to address. And then finally, a sustainable city for future generations, looking beyond the immediate and the personal and looking to our long-term future, how we interact with the region and the globe, really. And the goals there are reducing our carbon footprint and greenhouse gas emissions and providing reliable transportation connections to our regional neighbors. So that gets to how do we move about not only within the city, but out of the city into our adjacent municipalities, into our adjacent cities and towns, and how does all of that connect to the globe generally. So those are the 10 goals of the plan. For each goal, we held a workshop in November, and that's what really forms the draft that I'm going to be talking about here in a second. Looks like there might be a follow-up or another question.
We seem to be having a technical issue.
Okay.
Because the video and sound keep dropping out. Thank you, Cliff. They weren't seeing the Maslow hierarchy of needs.
Gotcha. So I'm sure. Go ahead.
Since we took a slight break there, I did have something. I didn't like when you said with Maslow's pyramid, you never can get out of the first level. That's not true. It makes it very, very much more difficult. People that of low income can succeed greatly. It's just the barriers to success are so much higher. So I just internalized that because I've studied that, and some of us have also added love to the first level of Maslow's pyramid, because you can have food, clothing, and shelter and still be in miserable conditions, and it can be hard for you then to rise out of that. So as we kind of cross over between social conditions and the planning of the city, I wanted to make sure that we were very clear that we understood things beyond just the way that it was stated there, that we know that individuals can grow and be successful under very, very difficult conditions. It just becomes harder.
Certainly. Thank you. So we're really going to get into the nuts and bolts here of the plan and the types of actions that are suggested and included in the draft plan. And you kind of can move from left to right on this slide, from rewards to penalties. And when we're talking about what does the city do, what can any kind of government entity do, you can move from rewards and trying to encourage people to do things, all the way to penalties and things like fees and fines. And it's important there to note that we're also talking about things that the city can do with our community partners and with other organizations and with our residents at large. So working on from the left, you can see we can talk about education and persuasion, things like marketing campaigns and public service announcements, informational sessions. Moving from left to right then to inducements and incentives, things like subsidies, grants, and reductions in the tax burden for specific actions that you take. Then services and capacity building. These are things like public works projects, different programs, and convening partnerships for collective impact and pulling together our partner organizations. Then system changes, really talking about ways that we can change our standard operating procedures and how people can communicate and report things directly to the city. And then finally, things that are maybe a little more familiar, laws and mandates, things like ordinances, laws and codes, and then again, finally, taxes, fees, and fines, and things like enforcement. So this is sort of the spectrum of the tools in a government's toolbox. And when we look at the draft plan, this is the way they're organized, kind of in this left to right format, to show you, what are the things that we can do to achieve this goal that are maybe more on the side of inducing activity or incentives for a certain behavior or development, all the way to changing the way that the laws and different mandates dictate how things will happen in the city. So at the end of the presentation, I'm going to give you a link and so that you can review the entire plan. But I wanted to walk through one example of what a standard kind of page or a couple of pages of the plan looks like. You can see at the top, I just picked this one in particular, a goal of building wealth within our neighborhoods. And then there are a handful of objectives under that, which we'll go through. So an objective under building wealth within neighborhoods is to increase the number of people that both live and work in York City. So we know that a number of people come into the city each day to work that live from outside of the city, and there are a number of people that live in the city that have to go outside of the city to work. This objective is about increasing the number of people that sort of spend their entire day here, right? That live and work here. So we have good data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the Census Bureau about what those numbers are. And at the workshop around building wealth within our neighborhoods, we talked about what success would look like, what our criteria for success is. So increasing the living wage jobs in York City, diversifying the jobs and the job offerings, having a highly educated and employable community and residents, and ultimately making York a place that people want to live. So what are the causes of why our current condition doesn't match our success? And you can see there's a number of causes that we identified. But there's a lack of housing choices. So maybe if you're not looking for a traditional single-family home or a row home or an apartment, maybe there's something in the middle there that is not available to you. And we want to increase the availability of different types of housing, and that's a different objective as well. But also, You can look at the high tax rates and the impact that has on people that want to live and work in the city. There's inadequate employee training and any number of causes here. And then finally, the effect. So if we don't change things, if we don't change the way things are right now, what is going to happen negatively over the next 10 to 20 years? People will have reduced discretionary spending, likely, because they'll be spending money on transportation. We'll have continued perceptions of an unsafe community, perhaps. We'll have increased traffic because, again, we'll be this commuter community where people are coming in and leaving every day. The city, as a government, will lose out on revenue. Poverty will increase, and there's a potential for erosion and division of social life. And just as a second example here, there's another objective, again, under this goal of building wealth within our neighborhoods, to increase the number of entrepreneurs and locally owned businesses. And I'm not going to walk through all of these again, but you can see, again, that for each objective we walk through, what is our criteria for success? What does success look like under this objective? What is the cause of the problem, and what are the effects if we do nothing about it? And then finally, this is, again, an example of what one of these lists of our potential tool kit for each objective looks like. So on the left, you have education and persuasion, things moving then to incentives to change behavior and change development, all the way to changing our laws and our mandates, changing our ordinances, and looking at taxes, fees, and fines to accomplish each objective. And again, it's really important that all of these came out of these workshops that we held with our partners in the community, different organizations, city staff, as well as everyday regular residents that attended these meetings. So I'm going to pause there before we kind of wrap up and go through what is left in the comprehensive plan update. Are there questions about sort of the framework of the plan? Because the plan as it stands right now is about 40 pages, and that doesn't include some of the more graphical maps and graphs about the current condition. Just looking at this work that we accomplished over the last 6 or 8 weeks, it walks through the criteria, the cause, the effect, and then looking at different options for policies, programs, and projects that we might implement.
Yeah, I have a question. In the schedule, so quite frequently, folks might wait till the end and assess what has been, maybe not be part of the process, but be there to critique after. Will there be the opportunity of this draft plan to be out there for an extended period of time so that we almost have a second not a full process, but a second process where people can say, oh, this is what was happening? This is now I'm prepared to input because I can see what kind of things people were thinking about. Will we have that extended period of time?
Absolutely, yeah. That's exactly what this meeting is about, to kind of kick off that extended amount of time where all of this is going to be public. For those of you that are here, there's a link at the last page of the presentation, and I'll show that to the Facebook stream as well. But yeah, this is all going to be online, and everyone will have the opportunity to go through, as you said. If you haven't been participating or deeply engaged during the development of the plan, you'll have the opportunity now to say, okay, what's been going on and where do we stand right now? And this, again, is before we're doing sort of the formal public comment period where it's really at the end, Yep. Other questions?
Question from Mr. Kirkland. Looking structurally at city planning versus county planning, do we in the city have the resources needed, i.e., land use planner, transportation planner, community development planner, etc., to execute and properly build a comprehensive plan? I believe we have one planner in the city planning. Should there be more collaboration with county planning?
So there was a couple of different points to Mr. Kirkland's comment. Certainly, the County Planning Commission has a large staff, and we have been working with the County Planning Commission at all of these workshops, pulling in, as Mr. Kirkland said, there's a transportation department, so there was a representative of the transportation department at the workshops where we talked about transportation. There is a representative from the housing division when we were talking about housing. There's staff from the County Planning Commission has been involved throughout the comprehensive plan, especially in this last kind of push on these workshops. Along with that, the economic action plan from the county and the County Economic Alliance, which was just updated in 2020, is part of the county's comprehensive plan focusing on economic development. And it's been really important that we worked and to move that forward, that county economic action plan, and to identify the ways that we could dovetail and find the connections between the county economic action plan and this plan in particular. So the county, economic action plan is looking at attracting businesses to the county of York and trying to develop our existing ecosystem of economic development. And we support all of that. And in addition to that, our city comprehensive plan is looking at ways that the city residents specifically can become engaged in the larger county economic development as we talk about building wealth, as we talk about building socially cohesive neighborhoods. So I went on a little bit of a tangent there, but I think, it's really important that yes, we work with the partner organizations because it's not just planning, but the city needs to work with our partner organizations to accomplish any of our objectives. So I hope that answers that question.
The other question is from Mr. Don, and he says, education was critical to all types of progress. How active were the schools, K through 12 plus college, and what actions were done to include their voices? Yeah,
unfortunately, I'll start with the K through 12 organizations have not been very involved in the comprehensive planning process, to be perfectly open and frank about that. We also recognize the autonomy of the school district, and as much as we can, we will continue to work with them to improve the schools, because it did come up, very frequently that the schools are an issue for people that would like to live in the city of York. Beyond K-12, though, Penn State York has been involved. We recently connected with a Penn State graduate student on a couple of different topics that they are interested in assisting the planning process on and the comprehensive plan. York College has been a partner through working through some of these workshops and facilitation of how we can have these community conversations. So we're looking at ways to make sure that the post-secondary community is involved, and we're also looking at ways when we're talking about educational attainment and economic development for workforce development, for trades and those kinds of things. So it's not just about getting your bachelor's degree or your graduate degree or whatever it might be, but lots of different opportunities are available.
Mike, I have a follow-up to that, and that was that were direct invitations given to the educational institutions?
Yeah. So we have a long list of stakeholders that have been invited to all of our meetings along the way, and the city school district, all of our educational institutions have been included.
I think that was just an absolutely great point, and of course they're the future leaders of the city of York. So can I make a request that we put extra emphasis and extra effort into giving them copies of the draft plan and making sure that they have an opportunity, perhaps some, whether even at the college level or high school level or younger, might see this as a valuable activity within the classroom. And we may be able to bring some more comments in that way.
Yep. Thank you for that. Anything else? So last couple of slides before we say goodnight for now and end this, wrap up this kind of check-in. What work remains for city staff and planning? Finalizing the current conditions for all of our goals and objectives. As we work through those workshops, there was additional information that people at those workshops said maybe we need to collect this information so that we have a better understanding about where we stand right now as a baseline, and then we can continue to look at that moving forward. You might have noticed that I said we've hosted 9 of our 10 workshops, so we're looking at hosting the final workshop on our goal of challenging York's reputation as an unsafe place. Commissioner Muldrow is a busy man, as you might expect, so we are working together to get something on his calendar so that he can assist with leading us in that workshop in particular. As I mentioned, working with the neighborhood associations and different organizations to finalize those vision statements for each area, and then updating that future land use map, which is really sort of the culminating point of a lot of this comprehensive planning work. Before we then go to kind of a final draft to go to the Planning Commission, the City Planning Commission, this is your opportunity for reviewing and commenting on this document before we move into a formal final public comment period. So to the mayor's point earlier, this is a great opportunity. If you haven't checked in, this is a great opportunity to do so. Then we'll be working on prioritizing, this is a long list of possible actions, so we need to prioritize them and maybe give a little more emphasis and detail to the particular projects, investments, and policies changes that we want to work on in the short term. As I mentioned before, the county and the city planning commission will then formally kind of review it and open it up for an extended public comment period, which is mandated by state legislation. And finally, the last requirement there is that we're checking in with our adjacent municipalities, making sure that nothing we're proposing is in direct violation or doesn't sync up with what's happening on our borders, essentially, when we're talking about the future land use plan. And then the critical point here is, even after we adopt this plan, as I said, if you go back to that diagram of the planning process, we will obviously be working on implementation. So whatever we are prioritizing in this plan, we'll be adopting the policy changes that we're looking at. We're working with council on ordinance changes, updating the zoning ordinance so that it reflects the goals, the objectives, and everything else that's in this comprehensive plan, and working with our partner organizations on any of the other action items. But it's really important, and I think this is often lacking in any planning process, that each year on a regular basis we're taking time to reflect, review, and give feedback and hold those workshop style conversations every year so that we can look at the success that has or hasn't happened in the last year. We can review our problem statements to make sure that the causes that we thought were the reasons for not achieving success are still the case. And we can determine the priority actions for the next year to allow for flexibility and finally to review our participants and resources. Maybe new organizations have cropped up that are interested in a particular goal, and we need to make sure that they have a seat at the table as well. So, all of that to say, the draft plan, which walks through every goal and objective, every problem statement, and all of the ideas for policies, programs, and policies, is now available. It's on this link, bit.ly/planyork. There are printed copies of this presentation here tonight. There will also be printed copies of this presentation as well as the plan itself available upstairs in the Department of Economic and Community Development. My contact information is on the screen right now. So mpritchard@yorkcity.org, or you can give me a call. The plan itself is a PDF. It opens just like a Google Drive, in Google Drive. So you can comment directly on the plan itself. I will see all of those comments. Anyone will be able to see all of those comments. So you can even read what your neighbors and friends are saying about the plan and perhaps respond to them. Or if you want to send your comments directly to me. That is all I have in terms of a presentation for our live stream and our friends on Facebook. Are there any remaining comments?
Latisse Brown would like to state that we need to update the stormwater ordinance as well.
Yes, yeah, that's an excellent point. And Latisse knows stormwater very well, so she has volunteered to be involved in that process, I'm sure. But yeah, that is a key thing that's coming out of in the next year. Any other questions or comments? Thank you. And with that, I will turn it back to the mayor.
Thank you,
for
Mike.
some closing comments.
Great job. Thank you. And I just want to take a last moment to encourage everyone to participate in this planning process, because if you stay in York, if you're going to live here, if you're going to have your family here, this affects you for the next 20 years. There are very few things that are so broad and are directing our city as when we have every 10 or so years a comprehensive plan that really paints the picture of what we're doing. And I will say that our administration intends to be guided by this document, and I hope that future administrations will be as well, because this is the time that we get the voice of the people. So people, we need to hear your voices.
Thank you, Mayor. So again, that will wrap up our live stream for Facebook.